Let's continue our conversation with Scott Thomson, the conversation between the CEO of Bank of Nova Scotia and John Ehrlichman. Here's what he had to say about what he'll be watching in the near term on the economic and political front.
Well, there's two elections. Actually, there's three elections, but the two that for me that I'm thinking about a lot right now is the U.S. election, obviously, between the Republicans and the Democrats, and then also in Mexico, you've got a new president coming in, and which is also important. From the U.S. perspective, I don't think a different administration really matters to us. I mean, I think we've found a way to work with all administrations, and we will continue to do that. As I think about the economic implications of both of the platforms, it's a little bit concerning from a Canadian perspective because there's an inflationary aspect and there's a GDP growth aspect of that I think I'd like to hear more from both candidates on that before coming to a conclusion. In Mexico, I think the transition of power from AMLO to Claudia Sheinbaum, who's the new president, who we know well, has just highlighted some concerns around, are they going to continue to operate as they have in the past? And we just have to be thoughtful about that and cautious. Ultimately, it doesn't change the long-term strategy. The long-term strategy is a mega trend around connectivity between Canada, US, Mexico, and we're clearly differentiated with any bank in providing that connectivity to our clients.
Okay, so this interconnected North American economy, that's a train that you think ultimately is hard to derail.
I think so. I mean, when you look at the amount of US mid-market clients right now that are investing in Mexico and the amount of connectivity between the supply chains and that growth in that connectivity, it's $800 billion of trade between Mexico and the US with commercial clients and also between Canada and the US. No matter what administration is in power, that connectivity is going to continue.
Okay, presidential elections aside, we're watching monetary policy. The Bank of Canada, of course, has already cut interest rates a couple of times, is expected to do so for a third consecutive meeting. There are growing expectations. The U.S. Federal Reserve is getting ready for its first interest rate cut of this cycle. As you watch monetary policy, how are you feeling about the economic story for Canada and the United States?
Yeah, well, I mean, two aspects of that. One, you've already seen the yield curve reprice about 100 basis points in the last couple months. And so from a Bank of Nova Scotia perspective, that's really helpful because we obviously rely somewhat on wholesale funding. And so to see wholesale funding rates come down as we continue to build out our deposit franchise will be really helpful for us as we think about 2025 earnings. That's point one. Point two, I think it's also helpful for the consumer. And one of the things that we've been pleased with is the reaction of the Canadian consumer to higher rates. And we're uniquely positioned because we have a variable rate mortgage. So we've seen this up close and every quarter. And it's been impressive to see the Canadian consumer adjust to higher rates. And I think the relief now is going to be really important. And so that relief, which we expect another 50 basis points by the end of the year from the Canadian Central Bank, I think that relief will be really helpful for the Canadian consumers as we think about 2025.
I mean, a lot of people are hoping for a so-called soft landing scenario for the economy. Is it too early to say whether that could happen?
I do think we're going to see a soft landing. I think we've been, as our chief risk officer said on our earnings call, we've been somewhat pleasantly surprised by the resiliency of the Canadian consumer. There's a lot of mortgages, coming due in 2025 and 2026. To the extent that rates come down, which they appear to be doing, I do think that enables a soft landing for the Canadian economy.
Okay, so in this environment, how are you thinking about setting money aside for potentially bad loans, credit provisioning? I mean, it's something that all the banks are thinking about right now. How are you navigating that?
We, like other banks, have seen a big increase in provisioning on the back of the higher rates and the weakening economy. As I think forward in both our international markets and our domestic markets, my hope here is you start to get better from here. And what was really encouraging this quarter for us is from an impaired loans perspective. We seem to see a little bit of a stabilization in our international markets and a little bit of bright spots in our Canadian markets. And so it does appear that aligned with that soft landing thesis that we can navigate this appropriately into 2025.
Okay, and finally, Scott, the business of banking is very much about numbers, but behind the scenes, culture is an important driver of an organization. It's been important to you in your time as the CEO of Scotia. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's been happening behind the scenes?
Yeah, well, we've had a lot of focus on this, and a big part of this has been the enterprise-wide thinking. And so my example of the wealth and the Canadian bank working together, I think is starting to have an impact. We've also, promoted people within the bank, and we've added some new faces around my leadership team. And so there's been a significant change. It's great to see, though, 80% of those new executives and new positions have been internal promotes. And so there's been a great focus here on getting internal people into new roles, but also bringing in some external folks to be able to look around and see what world-class is and help our teams get to the next level. And so that has gone well. I think the third part of this is just the employee engagement. And we've seen great engagement improvement over the last year among our employees. And so the 90,000 Scotiabankers, and this is what happens when you get 3 quarters in a row of doing what you say you're going to do, the 90,000 Scotiabankers believe. They believe in what we're doing, and that's hugely powerful. Do never underestimate the power of employee engagement, working together, and the belief that comes with 90,000 Scotiabankers doing the right thing for clients.